It's student visa interview season. And if you're an international student, congrats on getting those admits, which are happening right now. And the next big step in your journey is the visa interviews. And that can really make or break you going abroad. So in this video, we're going to give helpful tips, tell reasons why they get refused, complications and topics to be careful about to help you ace that visa interview. Check it out. Hey friends, welcome to Chine Coaching. And as you know, Chine Coaching, we love helping guide people to success on their cross-cultural journeys, especially international students and things like visas and immigration. And in this video, we've got our friend Mandy from Argo, and we're going to be breaking down specifically student visas. You know, a lot of you guys are coming on F1. There's also J1, M1, and these visa interviews can be hopefully easy, but also complicated. And so stay tuned to the very end, especially for complications and things that you need to be really, really careful about. But Mandy, welcome back, and please go ahead and introduce yourself again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back, Rob. My name's Mandy Fierbacher. I am a former U.S. State Department diplomat and ex-visa officer. I have interviewed probably over 100,000 international citizens for their U.S. visa interviews during my time as a diplomat. And it was a really fun experience. And now what I do is I help clients who have problems with their visa interviews.
Definitely. And I know this video is going to really help out, especially students preparing for these upcoming visa interviews this summer. So the first topic is refusals. And what is the impact of a past refusal on an upcoming visa interview?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. And, I think it's no secret that visa interviews are extremely high stakes. The visa officer that you end up talking to at your consulate, they have absolute discretion and power to make a decision to approve or deny your case. Once you get a visa denied, that will go into your visa record permanently in the US government systems, which means that anytime you go back to the consulate and interview the next time, even if it's for a totally different type of visa, that visa officer will be able to have access to all of your previous former denials. And they will be able to see right away, oh, okay, this person was already refused a visa, twice, once in 2016, once in 2018. So that information will sort of live on, which is why it is so important to do your very best to try to pass your interview on the first try, because you don't want that record hanging around.
And why is it important for someone to figure out why they were refused previously in a visa interview?
Yeah, it's really important for students to figure this out, because if they get denied a visa and they don't know why, and generally students don't, most people don't, visa officers almost never explain the reason why your visa has been refused at the time they refuse your visa. And you go back in the next time and you just apply again and you do the same thing. It's unlikely that it will change for you, the decision, because you haven't addressed the root cause of the refusal. And this is why it's so important to sort of work with an expert, explain exactly what happened during the interview, what questions you were asked, what your responses were, so that you can pinpoint exactly why you're refused. Now, once you know why you were refused from the perspective of an expert, somebody who's done this millions of times before, then you can go into your next interview with a strategy and how to convince the officer that they either misunderstood the first time, or perhaps you weren't able to adequately explain it. And then you can actually address that refusal at its root cause and make it much more likely that the refusal will be overturned and you can get your visa approved the next interview.
I love that advice. If you try and do the same thing again, which got you refused, you can expect the same result, which is refusal. But knowing the reasons why and then pivoting to a new game plan will set you up for hopeful success in that next round. So
Absolutely. And one thing I want to mention, Rob, is, I feel like so many people come to us and they think they know why they were refused. Usually it's because it was the last question they were asked before they were denied the visa. So sometimes the question is, okay, who is sponsoring you for your student visa? You give a response and they say, you know what, I'm so sorry, I can't approve your visa today. So then that student leaves the window thinking, oh my God, it has everything to do with my sponsor, when really it's actually a variety of factors, and they have to look at your entire life circumstances. And so you have to address the refusal as a whole and not just what you think it is. And I'll give you a hint. You really don't know why you were refused. Doesn't have anything to do with the last question that you were asked.
That's really good to know. So let's talk about some of those common reasons. And the first one is funding. So how should people talk about funding, especially when preparing for a student visa interview?
So funding is a really important part of the F1 and J1 student visa interview. Your visa officer wants to know how you plan to pay for tuition and living expenses. And so if you're someone that got a scholarship from your school, that is something that's really important to bring up right away so that the visa officer realizes that you are an exceptional student, or you do well academically, that the school is willing to reward you with this. But for other types of funding, perhaps you're getting a student loan, which is a little bit complicated because that could be seen as a negative factor. Or perhaps a family member is sponsoring you and agreeing to pay for your tuition. You really have to give the visa officer context and a reasonable explanation for why that makes sense for your situation. And if that sounds really daunting, it's because it is, and you've never done this before. So it's totally okay that you don't know how this works. And so this is why it's so important to work with an expert at Argo Visa and to really, help explain your situation in a very short amount of time in a way that an American government official will understand it. And that's exactly what we do. And we're very passionate about what we do.
Mandy, I've heard this rumor talking about funding that students should have at least 1.5 times proof of funding for what it might be costing them to study abroad. Uh, is that truth? Is it a rumor? I've heard a lot of people use that term. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not a bad thing to have adequate finances to prove that you can pay for your tuition. That's always a good thing. However, in my time as a visa officer, I will say that there are so many students that get approved their visas even though they don't actually have any physical documentation to show that they can pay for it. And there are also students who have stacks of documents this high showing, I have this amount in my bank account, my family has this amount, and then they get denied a visa. And the reason is because the visa officer has to believe you in those few short minutes that you can pay for it. And they don't like to look at documents, which is why you can't rely on your bank statement or, putting enough money in there. It has to be about your engagement with the visa officer. You're looking them in the eye. They have to trust you and be confident that they believe you and what you're saying. And they're like, you know what, I'm going to attach my name and give my stamp of approval on this person and let them go to the United States. So that's really what this process is all about. So even if you don't have, the physical documentation that demonstrates you can pay for it, if you're able to engage in the right way with the visa officer, really get them to understand you and believe you and trust in you, you can probably get your visa approved without showing anything, which is kind of, I think, great news for a lot of people.
I like that perspective. It's more about the way you communicate and connect and kind of give justification versus just actual documents, and the way you connect and the visa officer understands it. So, yeah. So, my friends, if you are loving this video, learning a lot, give a big like and thumbs up to say thanks to Mandy for sharing these great tips and experience. And our chai question for this video is, what questions do you have about student visa interviews? Let us know in the comments if you have other questions, either based on what we're talking about or we haven't covered about student visas like F1, J1, M1. Let us know in the comments and we can answer those or make more videos about those topics as well. Next, we want to talk about some of these complications that might increase your risk of getting denied. So Mandy, talk more about what people need to be careful of and communicate well in these kind of touchy topics for student visa interviews.
Absolutely. So I think what most international citizens don't realize is any complications in your situation will actually increase your risk for getting your visa denied. So this includes, having a lot of family who are already in the United States, getting a student loan. Perhaps you're in love with an American citizen. Perhaps on your previous stay to the United States, you stayed for a really long time and you're going to have to explain that. So any of these complications will increase your risk for a visa refusal. And a couple other ones that come to mind, especially for student visa applications, are if you only selected one school and the school has been, pursuing you, and this is the only school you looked at, that could be seen as a red flag. So again, keep in mind that anything that looks out of the ordinary, if you're a non-traditional student, you're, someone who is studying in the United States for your second career, and you're older than your typical, 18, 19-year-old, that is going to be a red flag. So, if this is you, it doesn't necessarily mean that your visa will be refused. It just means that you need to do more to prepare in advance so that you're not going to, become a part of the statistic and get, a 30-second refusal. And we don't want that for anybody who is listening to us.
Yeah, anything that's out of the ordinary requires more well-prepared explanation so that the visa officer can properly understand those good answers. One I get as along with that's kind of complicated is who's sponsoring them. You know, I get there's obviously the immediate family, like their parents, but then there's maybe like an uncle or a cousin. How do these sponsors kind of factor in?
The sponsor is important because your story has to make sense to an American visa officer. And if you have a distant family member sponsoring you for your studies, that might seem a little bit odd to an American, because American officers, they also went to university. They probably had to take out student loans or, have funding from family. But to them, they might say, well, my uncle would never do that for me, or my cousin, would never pay for my tuition or my living expenses. So what you need to do is really give a lot of context. What I would recommend in this situation is explain this relationship that you have with this person. How often do you talk to each other? Why is it that you're close enough where he would be willing to take this risk on you and willing to do this for you? I think that would be really helpful to the visa officer.
Because in America, family is a much more nuclear, where in a lot of Eastern cultures, it's more kind of a joint family and the way they connect. And so helping them understand why that relationship is important and why your parents aren't doing it could be really helpful.
Absolutely.
So, Mandy, now tell us, I mean, great tips, great insights on the trickiness of student visas and things to be careful of, but how else can you guys at Argo help people prepare and understand student visas to have success?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Argo is basically a company of ex visa officers, just like myself. We've spent years working at US embassies and consulates around the world, making decisions on visa interviews and whether or not to approve or deny visas. And so now we have all left the government service, and there's about 25 of us, and we help students like yourselves prepare for the visa interview, because we can take a look at your case and we can say, okay, these are going to be all of the red flags and what you need to be prepared to answer. And then let's do some mock interviews and we'll give you feedback on your responses and give you a strategy. And I think the reason why Argo exists is because when we used to be visa officers, we used to wish there was a company like ours that was out there giving accurate information to students, because we know how important it is. This visa is the gateway to all of your hopes and dreams in the United States, getting the best education you can, doing the best you can for your family. And so we wish there wasn't so much misinformation out there, or people being told to lie, or oh, say this and you'll get your visa approved. And this is why we do what we do now, and we're here to help you. And we love working with Chai Coaching and Rob to make sure that you guys are getting accurate advice for your visa interview.
Yeah, I'll just say that these guys make a big impact at Argo. I've seen the great feedback of my friends getting the coaching, feeling confident, and doing the right things they need to do in those visa interviews. So if you guys want to learn more about Argo Visa or connect for a coaching call, we got links in the video description and also in the comments. Click there, find all the information, and get the help you really need to make sure that you can, do a great job and be confident and excited for your visa interview versus scared and wondering what's going to happen. And so, Mandy, this has been incredible. I know that we've got several other videos on our channel for visa interview related stuff. Be sure to check those out because there's other awesome tips that we didn't quite cover in this video. And yeah, everyone, thanks so much for watching. And Mandy, thanks for hanging out and sharing your insights.
Absolutely. It's always such a pleasure to be here, Rob.
Thank you. And be sure to connect with us online on social media like Instagram, LinkedIn. You can also follow Mandy and her tips there as well. Be subscribed to our newsletter so you get more great information and events. We're going to be doing a webinar soon with Mandy, which is going to be fun, where you can do live Q&A. And thanks so much for tuning in, my friends. We'll see you next time at Shine Coaching. Cheers.